This recording is made of Mrs. Tory Savage, born in Cimarron, Kansas, and moved to Ardmore in the year of 1895. Mrs. Savage was a teacher and principal at Franklin Ward for 6 years. She attended the first public school here in Ardmore and also Fort Worth University. This recording is made on February 28, 1956, in Mrs. Savage's home at 921 D Northwest.
I just want to start telling what I'm
Yes,
thinking.
please.
I do indeed remember the first public school in Ardmore. We took an entrance examination, and 8 of us made the 8th grade. With 2 later added, we made up the first graduating class of Ardmore High School. There were 10 in that first graduating class. 6 girls, Bertie and Bessie McCoy, twin daughters of an early-day Indian Territory physician. Mary Tucker, now Mrs. Savage, Mrs. Mamie Nesbitt Targeson, deceased, and myself, Toy Mayhew. 4 boys, Major Cruz, Oklahoma City lawyer, Guy Webb, deceased, Sam McCullough in the Ardmore Post Office, Kelly Brown, a lawyer of Muskogee. Previously, we had all attended some one of the various private schools in Ardmore. In a private school, the teacher's pay depends upon the number of paying pupils. Therefore, discipline varies. A child's progress depends upon the inspiring influence of the teacher, the urge of parents, and the will to learn on the part of the pupil. Therefore, in this first class, there was a variance of some 2 or 3 years in ages. I remember, though, we envied another class who had a beautiful teacher brought up from Gainesville. Her pupils bragged that she made them keep their feet under the desk, not in the aisle. We put our feet any place. We dearly loved our teacher, T.B. King, but he had taught a private school in his own frame building at the corner of Washington and Broadway, and it became the Ardmore High School. He knew his work, and we learned much from him, but he made no demands on our behavior. We were the highest grade in the beginning, and so continued to be seniors each year till we reached the 11th grade and graduation, the only group to do such a thing with no reflection upon their scholarship. In our final year, Miss Mary Gwynn Nesbitt, the late Miss John Whiteman, became principal and our teacher. For even in my own teaching days, all principals taught a full class. If you have ever seen the movie Our Wilderness, you have seen an exact picture of our program at graduation, from salutatorian, class prophet, and historian to the valedictory. And by the way, Mary Tucker was salutatorian, and I was valedictorian of the class. What else you want?
Mrs. Savage, could you tell me the subjects you took when you were in high school?
Yes, mathematics we went through. We took algebra and plain and solid geometry. That was as high as our math went, mathematical subjects. And we had physics, and we had Latin. We had 2 or 3 years of Latin there. And, of course, we had our English and our history, general and American.
I see. What was your grading system?
Well, we had monthly grade cards handed out to us, and it's very much the same as it is at this day and time, or my children's reports, I mean.
Well, were your grades based mostly on your test or your class participation?
Well, on both.
On both.
On both. Mm-hmm.
In your school, could you tell me how it was financed, the first public school was financed?
Through taxation, but I don't know any of the details, but I was a pupil and not a member of the board, although I knew several members of the board.
Well, could you tell us who was on that school board?
Well, Mr. George Henry Bruce was one that was on it from the very first, and Judge Potter, I know his initials, and Dr. Carr, father of the late Fred Carr. Those were three that I know were there. I think perhaps W.I. Cruz was, too.
Well, Mrs. Savage, when you became a teacher, what schooling had you had to qualify for that?
I'd had 2 years at Fort Worth University, which is now Oklahoma City University, and then a year at Denton Teachers College in Denton.
Could you tell me about how many students you had?
Oh, about 40.
About 40. How many teachers were in the Franklin Ward School?
10.
10 teachers. What was your pay about that time?
Well, the first year I began teaching, I got $40 a month. And then we had $2.50 or a $5 increase for the next 2 or 3 years. And then the last 2 years I taught, they were, I was principal and I got $80. And the second year, $85. However, that ward was the best paid ward in town because it was the largest ward. So
Mrs. Savage, during your school day, did you have any type of recess period?
oh yes, we had a morning recess and an afternoon recess, about 10 or 15 minutes. In the morning, or at recess, of course, first thing we gathered around the big old well out in the yard there with a bucket and 2 or 3 dippers, perhaps, in order to water the crowd. We all had a drink, took turnabout, saw to it, and went on to play then.
What games did you play at recess?
Well, I don't remember very well. I do remember the fun we had on the ice when we had ice and snow, but we played a game that was, seems to me it was prisoner's base. I know 2 lineups, and we ran to a certain station behind each line, and if we were caught, we were prisoners of the other side, and then we had to be reclaimed by those who could get through and touch a hand, and that would bring us back all right. Of course, the side that ended with the most people in their corral were winners.
How long did your school year last?
I don't know year by year how long. Of course, it was 9 months when I taught, but when I was in school at first, I do know that we finished the 3rd of April. We graduated. Our graduation exercises were on April the 3rd, 1903. And, of course, that may have been about the same length. We began in September and must have finished every year about in April.
Well, Mrs. Savage, I'd like to thank you very much for your cooperation in this recording. This interview has been made by Peggy Smithwick, senior in Ardmore High School, February 28, 1956.